The lasting effects of this training are the ones that you will carry with you for your entire career. If you're already making connections in your mind about the applications of these thoughts to our spiritual journey, consider then how much so that is true for these last words. When under the stresses of combat, or while simply training with your unit while on the home front, it is during these critical times where immediate recollection of training and discipline will become necessary and a fully applicable requirement for survival. In this journey of faith that we're experiencing together, we need to be prepared. We need training. We need to be equipped with and motivated by truth to survive and to live effectively the journey upon which we're set. I'm looking forward to the next several weeks of discussing some basic training, some foundational principles of this Christian faith, and ultimately to achieve some pretty big purposes, or to answer some very big questions, the questions that in one way or another we're all asking. Why do I exist? How shall I live? And where am I going? It's the big three. These are the questions of life. Why am I here? How shall I live? And where am I going? I would suggest that as we begin this series together, that this is a series for all of us. There are believers here who are 20 minutes old in their journey, as well as believers here who are decades along in their journey. And I am encouraged and convinced that this discussion will be helpful for all of us. For those of you who are new believers, some of what we talk about in the coming weeks may be new. And I hope and trust that much of what we talk about will be new instruction as part of your training in your young walk with Christ. For others of us, lots of this, most of this, maybe almost all of this will be stuff we've heard before. And it's good for us to hear it again and to think of it again and be reminded about the principles upon which our faith is established, to encourage us and to prompt us again back to our motivation of that first love for Christ. So, where to start? Where do we start this basic training? You might suggest at the beginning, right? No. I want to start before the beginning. What is true? What can be known to be true before the beginning is the truth upon which all of eternity hangs. The first 4 words of the Bible, if the testimony of this text can be believed, the first 4 words of the Bible contain the key to the cosmos. The first 4 words in this book open the door through which we gain access to the master plan of life. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God. In the very first phrase of God's written and eternal word to us, He invites us into the midst of the scene that started it all. To that moment in time when all that we now see, with its splendor, its majesty, its glory, its beauty, its complexity, its richness, its vastness, He invites us into the moment in time when all that we now see and that ever was first came into being. When God created. But as much as we have to gain by examining the significance of creation, its significance and its purpose and design, and as much as we are compelled to inquire about our role as human beings within the context of this creation, it is very profitable for us to first visit the question of what was true before the beginning. We want to rush to the fifth word. In the beginning, God created. What a scene that is. What an amazing concept that is. To go from nothing to something. But I would suggest to you, let's stop. In an important, significant way, let's stop at that fourth word. In the beginning, God. Beginning here signifies some amazing stuff. This word beginning points to a moment in time where this critical transition occurred between a state of nothing and something. A separating point between nothing and something. Beginning in this passage points to a time before there was time. As we read the first words of Genesis, we are called to understand, to recognize, to contemplate a time when there was nothing, when there was no earth, no sun, no moon, no stars, no galaxy, no universe, no substance or matter, no solids, liquids, or gases. There was nothing. No chemicals, no natural elements, no periodic table, no cells, no atoms, no oxygen, no air, no electric impulses, no energy of any kind, nothing. There were no thoughts, memories, histories, stories. There was nothing. But alas, in the midst of that nothingness, there was something out there somewhere, wasn't there? Somewhere. So difficult is it for us to understand the totality of this nothingness that we start with, that even the idea of somewhere doesn't make sense. There was so much nothingness that there was no somewhere. And yet, it is true that somewhere there was something. In the beginning, God did something. He created. Put another way, when there was nothing, God did something. But before we even talk about what God did, let it not escape us that God was. That in that nothingness, God was, God is. The first thing that God wants us to know about Him. The first thing that God wants us to know about life. The first thing that God wants us to know about anything is that He exists. That He is. I consider the story of Moses when God had called Moses to go to the Israelites in Egypt and to be their champion, to go before Pharaoh, to bring them out of Egypt. Now, the Israelites had been through decades and decades and decades of a time where they were sensing an increasing apartness from God, and a sense of being lost, a sense of being abandoned. Probably so many of them had forgotten about God. And when Moses is asking God, who do I tell them sent me when I go? God says, tell them that I am sent you. In other words, they need to know that I'm here. The first thing they need to understand is that I still exist. I am. In Hebrews 11:6, we learn that our faith begins necessarily on this point, that God is. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists, and that He rewards those who earnestly seek Him.